Hi everyone, I'm James Amon. I'm talking today about a modified exercise and what you can do when life throws you a curveball. Now, injuries are a classic example of this, but in this day and age, we also have to make changes to our exercise routines with little or no warning due to rapidly changing environments such as alert levels and lockdowns. So how we adjust to this changing environment is dependent on a number of factors. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of those and how you can bounce back from these better than ever if we make the right changes. Okay, so in the content today, so we're going to break it down into some subsections, adjusting to change and why we need to be robust to overcome challenges. There's the lifestyle balancing act and how we each interrelates with each other's outcomes. The slippery slope of injuries and how not to compound issues from being injured. How many tools we've got in our toolbox to be able to adapt and flourish in this environment. And I'll also focus in around obviously returning from injuries and the progressions and modifications of exercise that we can make with equipment as well, just to make sure we're still tracking and being able to progress. And then lastly, obviously, the very topical one at the moment is around COVID-19 and just how we can make changes and modify exercise just to make sure that we stay on top of the ball so we don't start to regress our training. So the subtle art of adjustment. So the reason I've titled this a subtle art of adjustment is that an adjustment is just a small modification to suit the current training environment. So we've all heard the saying, fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So while this is true in many ways, we need to ensure that preparation not only factors in how we plan to get better, it also needs to factor in the what ifs. And injuries are obviously a classic example of what if. So circumstances can derail even the best of our plans. So it doesn't really matter how well prepared we thought we were to reach our goals. If we can't adjust our mindset and our training, we risk derailing everything we've worked hard for. Age, injuries, health issues, and obviously pandemics. So in most cases, we adjust our training naturally as we get older, or if we've got health issues, we have to adjust things slightly. So I know in my last seminar on recovery, if you saw that one, I was talking about how adjustments can be just evaluating your current physical state and modifying your training loads to suit how you are and at that point of your life. And lastly, obviously, adjusting is the key to getting back on track. So COVID-19, again, classic example of what we have to do to adjust to make sure we don't really regress things both physically and mentally. So we're really going to try and focus in on how we get what we need to do to get a holistic balance across our life. And we're going to talk about the 3 pillars next and how we can balance those out to make sure we've got a good balance. So the 3 pillars we should all know by now, the 3 areas we really want to have a good control over is our health, our diet, and our exercise. Now, each interrelates with one another. So when modifying our exercise, we need to be mindful that we've got our diet and our health in check as well. The reason I say that, and we should know, is that if you drastically change one of these 3 areas, it's going to have a compounding issue on the other. So if you're upping your training, if you're training for a half marathon, all of a sudden you're running heaps more, but you're not changing your diet to suit that exercise, you're probably going to affect your health, right? Okay, so alternatively, if you start trying to, say, lose weight and you drastically change your diet, but you don't change your exercise to account for that, you're just going to run into problems. So we want to make sure that we're being proactive in all 3, because there's no point modifying one area without having an equal balance across the others. So the slippery slopes, we'll take a bit of time focusing on this. So, I've put some little bullet points down there, reacting positively to avoid negative outcomes. So the slippery slope is the point where something's occurred beyond our control, and we need to react accordingly to avoid its pitfalls. Injuries, again, are obviously the most obvious form of a slippery slope because it can become very overwhelming when you become injured. So athletes, yes, that's very, very, it has a big impact. But non-athletes as well, if Joe the plumber gets injured and can't work, there's going to be some issues there as well as to how you sit and what part of that slope you're on determines how well you're going to bounce back. So while injuries can't be avoided, that slippery slope can. It's evident that modification will need to be put in place via exercise and fitness just to ensure you don't slip down that slope. It can be the psychological struggle that will take you down the slope, and this sort of drags everything along with it, and you can get into a bit of a dark place. And the problem with that is we start to skimp on things like our rehab exercises we're doing for our injuries. You start eating poorly. Everything starts to compound. So first step, take check. Okay, right, I'm injured, or I'm sick, and I've got to make some changes and start to understand what you're going to need to do to get back to avoid spiraling downwards. Okay, the support crew, who's around you, what physios have you got, personal trainers, strength and conditioners, reaching out to those people that you need to be able to lean on that are there, that pure and simply to help get you back on track as soon as you can. Okay, so there's no point trying to fix it yourself, because that's often what we do. We want to make sure we've got the resources around us, because we often, I'm probably guilty, and you are too, of Googling how to correct injuries and things like that. But in reality, go to the experts. They're the ones that are actually going to sort you out. If you've finished your rehab plan as well, so this is that next step, you want to make sure that the support doesn't stop there. Okay, so if you've been discharged from the physio, what are you going to be doing next? Because the worst thing we want to do is go backwards and regress our training and get back to potentially injuring ourselves again. So making sure that you've got that post-rehab plan in place, because again, if you get injured because of that same injury and a bit of a lack of extra work, that's probably going to slip you down that slippery slope once again. So we've got to make sure we modify things and get another plan in place. The compounding issues makes returning to our pre-injury state even more difficult. Just we've got to be resolute, we've got to be disciplined, enable us to return both physically and mentally well. Now, I haven't put the link on there, but again, you could Google it. So an athlete that didn't literally write the book on it, he actually wrote the book on the struggles of getting back and not going down the slippery slope. There's a guy called Brent Tate. He was a Australian league player, but played for the Warriors, played for Queensland. So he was a phenomenal player, but man, his injury history, how he bounced back like he did, is incredible. He had, got some notes here, he had 4 knee reconstructions, 9 ankle operations, major surgeries to his shoulder, groin, and throat. He had 2 arthroscopies to clean up his knee. So he said that at every step of this, he could have easily thrown it away, because he was sitting there feeling sorry for himself, especially when he had like 2 knee reconstructions. Within I think 3 weeks of coming back and playing from one, he did the same injury again. And he speaks about the mental struggles and just how he really had to dig deep. But to avoid the slippery slope, he really surrounded himself with the right people, made the positive choices, and said, right, no, this is not going to get me down. So yes, he had to modify his lifestyle and everything he did, but he wanted to make sure that he didn't go down that slippery slope and get into a really dark place. So yeah, if you want some good material to read, it's incredible. The guy has got a lot of I've got a lot of respect for people like that. He had every obstacle thrown at him, and he bounced back every time, albeit sometimes for pretty short periods before he got back on the training pitch. So what do we have at our disposal? Okay, so this is around the toolbox. So we'll work our way around this. So basically, this is everything you've got available to you, and I'll just elaborate a little bit on some more of them. So home-based training, we're all getting pretty good at that, right? So there's really no excuse not to get stuck into training if you are stuck at home, whether it be rehab or strength and conditioning work. So what often is the biggest issue is to work out from home is probably the box below that, where it's the goals and planning, because we need a simple schedule or a calendar to know what you'll be doing on each day. That way, we've got a great way to stay committed to your home-based training, because it can be very easy just to sit on the couch and not exercise. So getting that planning for your home-based training is really important. Things that we do, getting creative is one of the fun parts of being at home. So I don't know if you guys did what I did under lockdown, but getting buckets out and filling with water, or using obscure and abstract things to like bike tubes to do some curls. Is one of the fun things about modifying your exercise at home. It's better than hitting a wall and then going down a slippery slope just feeling sorry for yourself. So it's really good. You can mix it up, have fun. We just need to have that right direction. So you've got to make sure you've got that proper plan in place. Exercise progressions, well, they're essential to ensure we don't plateau, because even though, say, if you are at home, you want to make sure you're progressing things, but outside of that, we definitely want to be able to really work into a good routine. We're actually overloading our bodies to get a positive change. So if you aren't familiar with what progressive overload is, it's basically continuing increasing the demands on the musculoskeletal and cardiovascular system to elicit positive change. So you just got to keep throwing stuff and progressing things to make sure we continue making those gains. And that doesn't matter if you're training for your first 5K fun walk, or an Olympic gold medal. There's got to be progression. So you've got to keep pushing it. So that's again where exercise professionals are probably good people to have in your corner to make sure you're still progressing and not wasting your time. Not wasting your time, but maximizing your training time. Specific exercise equipment. So with the world around us changing, more and more frequently we need to think about what we can bring into our lives to make sure we continue to move in a positive direction. I know every time we go into lockdown, people are scrambling to buy squat racks and dumbbells and kettlebells, and they soon realize there's a 27-week wait. So it's pretty disheartening that if we try and be reactive, we're just going to miss out. So we've got to make sure that, even I would say now, level 2, if you think that, unfortunately the reality is we probably will be going in and out of lockdowns for a while, can you prepare to get those specific exercise equipment now? Get it on order into your house just to make sure that you can keep progressing, so you don't get stuck. It's not essential, but again, if you're one of those people that has some issues that you need to continue to work on, it's great to get some kettlebells, bands, TRXs, and just start to add some weapons to your arsenal, really, just in case. But it's also good to do if you aren't a gym goer. You've got your stuff at your home, so you can commit to getting that work done at home with the gear that you need. Okay. Health professionals, as I spoke about before, one of the biggest assets in our toolbox that isn't often utilised is that of health professionals, such as myself, but physios and, as I spoke about before, personal trainers. The problem with this is the rise of the YouTube, Google searches. Okay, we're always looking for that quick fix, and we don't want to pay often for what it's worth. We get. I've even had athletes that subscribe to $3, bikini booty busting program, app-based programs that are from some obscure trainer in the looser sense of the term, firing out these generic programs which have got no individualization to them. So, it's really time to start to get aligned with people that can really help you, and you can meet with them and you can stay in touch, because it's a problem with a lot of these coaches and professionals that are all around the world. They really want your money. They don't care where you're at. They don't care how poorly you might be executing the moves and what risk you're putting on yourselves. They just want the money. So working with a qualified person, it sounds crazy, right? But we need to make sure that, for a little investment, you can really set yourself up. Recovery methods, again, I won't touch on this too much because my last presentation was on recovery, but basically we need to make sure that, if we're really we want to get fitter, faster, stronger, we need to make sure we've got adequate recovery. So we've got to modify our training to suit, and the way we do that is we need to make sure we recover better. So if we're progressing your training, you need to progress your recovery and really get yourself into that mindset of that's just as important as doing your training. You've got to recover. And again, if we are at home, we've got a lot more time to be able to do that. Okay, so we've got to make sure that the recovery methods are on point, because otherwise, again, we do risk setting ourselves back by getting injured or just tweaks and niggles and things like that, which mean we can't reach our training potential. So getting a plan in place for that, really important. But if you haven't seen my last recovery presentation, have a look at that. I've got some good tips and tricks as to just how many, again, a bit like a toolbox, just how many recovery methods we've got available to us that we could reach out for. Goals and planning. So, with reference to your toolbox, this is pretty simple. It's free, doesn't take much time, but it's also effective in giving you a pretty clear direction and understanding as to how you're tracking. This is really important, again, when we have to drastically adjust what we do when things are often turned on their heads. So this planning and goals should be an evolving document. Don't just stick it as this is it and I have to do everything to it. Keep moving the crossbar and adjusting it, because it's the best way to keep making good positive progress and probably not feeling overwhelmed if you have some setbacks. So these goals can be as simple as if you are stuck at home, right, this week I'm going to try and go for 3 runs a week, and for my recovery I might try and add an hour of extra sleep. So you could be doing, maybe 3, having, 8-9 hours sleep 3 times a week. Just matching it with your exercise goals. It's a really good way to stay on track. So the modified exercises, and I've put building back up. So this one here is all about getting an understanding of where you are now, so you can incrementally plan for where you want to go to. So it's common for me as a strength and conditioner to see athletes that believe they're further advanced than they actually are. Becomes all apparent pretty soon that they really aren't, and we have to rebuild all their movement patterns because they've just trained way ahead of where they should have been. So they've got a sort of ingrained poor pattern, like a squat, that we completely have to strip back and retrain. This is, again, sorry, this isn't just athletes, by the way. This is just for anyone, but being a strength and conditioner, I work with athletes. I often call it fast forwarditis. People, again, just getting way too far ahead in their training, trying to do things that are given to them by trainers and professionals without having an individualized idea of where they're at. So those of you returning from injury need to ensure that you don't get ahead of yourselves. And often this requires us to start with simple bodyweight exercises and a post-physio plan, because this is bodyweight exercises are just a great way of measuring progress as well, because we can easily replicate the movements and see if we can do more of them or through a bigger range of motion. They're great for the body because they decreases loading on joints and susceptible areas, so areas that are naturally prone to soreness, like lower backs and hip flexors and things like that. But best of all, we can, they're very effective and they're very adaptable as well, so we can match the two together. I say to a lot of people, especially those in lockdown, that basically you can still get good progress or training at home. You've just got to have that right plan in place. So just randomly trying to do 100 press-ups, 100 sit-ups and things like that probably need to be a little bit more specific. With the progressive overload, and I've put it on there, so the ways in which we can, so if you're not familiar with progressive overload, like I spoke about before, these are the ways that you can start to overload your body to get, to start challenging it and get a little bit more, a little bit more positivity and moving in the right direction. Decreasing the base of support, so it's pretty easy. So obviously this loads the opposing joint. If you're taking a leg off, for example, it loads the opposing body parts, okay, and just you often requires a lot more core stability and strength to be able to balance that change. You want to make sure that you modify that, but just subtle little changes can be as simple as narrowing your stance when you do a squat. So you've got a slightly narrower stance, so you're not, your body's got to work a bit harder to stay upright. Little things like that. Increasing the range of motion, so it's pretty easy, right? So deeper squats, longer lunges, bigger press ups. So you really increase that range of motion in the joints. So trying to work your way, again, for a press up, can you get your chest to the floor, things like that, work towards that. Increasing volume is probably pretty straightforward, right? So more reps and sets of your training will elicit a greater training response, moves you out of your comfort zone. And again, going back to, great for measuring progress on the body weight part there, it is a great way to know that when you start to bump up the volume, that, when you were in week 1 of lockdown versus say week 4, you've gone from doing 10 push-ups to 35 push-ups. And, a great way to really to up the ante, and you're going to be getting a good, your body's going to be getting a really good effect from that. Time under tension, this is just as simple as slowing movements down. So we just load those muscle fibers so, longer. Again, that's just going to help significantly for things like developing strength. Time under tension, the muscles is really key for that. And lastly, loading mechanisms. So this is normally within a gym setting, but it can involve, just incrementally increasing weights and things like that. It can be done at home, but in the gym, more weight on bars, more weight on machines. It's a fresh challenge that can elicit positive changes if you do it correctly and incrementally. My favorite saying that I use with all my athletes, and they get frustrated because it often means they're going to be sore because we have to keep changing their training, is the body only changes it. Excuse me. The body only changes with variation, right? So you often get into a training program and you hit that sweet spot where this is great, you're cruising in, you're not sore. We want to make sure that you're not doing that for too long, because your body just goes into autopilot and you're not really going to be getting much of a training effect. Yes, you're going to the gym. Yes, you're doing what's in your program, but if you're not challenging yourself and it's far too comfortable, then you've got to flip it on the head. So, and I normally say 6 to 8 weeks is the magic time for that to happen. Okay, so the next few slides here, we've just got a couple ones here, and this is pretty simple. So those of you that are quite well, quite comfortable in the gym, this is pretty simple, right? But I'll explain firstly what a bodyweight progression looks like, and then I'll talk about exercise progressions and what they would look like with the exercise equipment progressions. But this is a classic example, as I said here, of how you modify exercises through progressive overload. So starting with your basic plank, 4 points of contact on the ground, the knees are going to be supporting a lot of the weight of your body, so your core will get a bit, your shoulders will get a bit, but your legs can take the main, they absorb most of that gravitational force, which is why it's a really good starting point for people that are doing planks, okay? If you go to the next one, which is just your standard plank, okay, can you see that we've still got the 4 points of contact on the ground? However, now because those legs don't take the weight, the core is now significantly challenged and the back a little bit as well. Making sure the body stays strong and anatomically correct is a way that we really need to make sure we hold that position well. So it's just that next step up. Again, would probably indicate why you wouldn't want to start there if you find the first one hard. But again, a lot of people don't know that you can start with a slightly safer way before you get up. Progression number 3, bottom right there. Okay, so we've taken a leg off now. So we've gone from 4 points contact to 3. That means that obviously those 3 joints would then pick up the load of that leg that's off. Often we have to counter that with sort of anti-rotation. So we need your core to really, I'm doing this with my hand now. The core needs to be able to stabilize the body more, so it's going to challenge that and overload that. So again, just subtle lifts. It doesn't have to be for long, but you can take that leg off to just challenge your body. And then level 4, again, pretty crazy hard exercise, but again, it is a progression up. So the center of gravity is raised, the loading through that one arm is significantly more, and then everything your core has to do to try and hold you steady is going to be significantly overloaded. So a really good sort of modification, again, if you're quite advanced, how you can continually make that exercise a little bit harder. So they're all progressive, but it highlights sort of, again, why you need to start, at top left and work your way around, because you're just going to be getting a pretty poor poor training effect if you're trying to jump ahead of yourself. It's just not really going to be beneficial to your training. I'll bring into the next one here, which is obviously the exercise equipment progression. So those of you that are in a gym, but again, if you've got the stuff at home, Common exercise, so I thought I'd highlight the squat because that's the one that it causes me sleepless nights, seeing how people just jump straight into a rack and start squatting. So I think the issue comes down to movement competency. Okay, so this is why we need to modify exercises to suit the ability of the individual. Okay, so not jumping ahead. Most people go straight to the fourth picture, which is a barbell squat, without being able to perform all three exercises before it very well. If someone has a poor body weight squat, why would you load that pattern? Why would you load them and then get them to then do that pattern poorly but with weight on them? It really just triggers a whole bunch of red flags where muscles aren't working properly, the stabilization's not happening, and then so there's going to be loading points, and often that is going to be knees and it's often going to be back. Okay, so step one, that's why I said the banded squats is a really good start, because using bands are great for really activating the glutes, which is often poorly done when you squat. You can start to learn the pattern. It just requires that little bit of extra effort than a bodyweight squat, but a band you can use anywhere. It starts to really get that so get those glutes firing. You can progress that to the next one, which is TRX squats. So this piece of equipment allows individuals to sort of move through a greater range of motion, so you can start to get comfortable sitting back into the heels. Again, still facilitates that glute activation and drive, but that you really get that good triple extension through your ankles, your knees, and your hips, which is why they're really good. You can load how much you want. Your upper body can hold onto the handles to really pull you up to get used to that, and then you can just back that load off, so you can use your legs a lot more. Next progression, I'd say, would be the goblet squat, bottom right. Okay, so this is just now starting to load that squat. The weight's at the front, so it's a good counterbalance. But now again, you can really work to sitting back into the heels, getting the knees tracking in line with the toes, and just getting comfortable with that extra load above body weight to start to challenge your squat pattern. So then finally we get to the barbell squat, and again, this is funny why people start at this level, because starting at number 4 is pretty risky. But the added challenge now, the bar's behind us, so we need our core and all those stabilizing muscles to work. We need to be able to keep our torso in a good position, and just there's so many finely tuned, so many things that need to be finely tuned for this pattern to be effective and safe, which is why again we would normally work around a progression like this. So just be mindful that if you are squatting and it goes across a lot of other exercises, should I be peeling it back? And again, if you need to know, that's why it's great to work with a strength and conditioner or a personal trainer. They've got eyes on you and they can correct you in those patterns to let you know where you should be starting. Okay, so always reach out. So this brings us to our last slide, and probably the most topical one again, which is exercising in a COVID world. As I mentioned earlier, we need to take lockdowns in our stride, and try and make the most of the opportunity that presents. There is a glut of free online resources that can be made available, so tapping into these can be really beneficial. We want to make sure that there are, as I said, I don't want to contradict what I said earlier, but there is a glut of free app-based stuff. So I know, for members here at the Massey Rec Centre, I provide training programs that go out to all our members. So that's something that is generic, but it's free. So if it means that people are actually going to get off their butt and do something, as opposed to sitting on the couch and potentially spiraling backwards, then make the most of it. I know Les Mills on Demand has been really popular. Families have been getting into that. So try and make the most of those free resources that are out there, because yes, it's a modification to what you'd normally be doing in your exercise, but hey, it's a great way to keep moving, keep active. Going for walks and runs, most people do that, and especially under lockdown. So it's a great way to sort of keep your health and fitness in good order, and you don't need any equipment for it. What I would suggest is probably looking at, start to measure and time some of these runs, because, or walks, not everyone runs. So try and make the most of those walks and get out there and time them. So maybe once a week or twice a week, you're going to push yourself to try and really extend yourself on the run to get yourself at least thinking, oh, well, I'm actually getting a lot better, because again, it's very, very measurable, because you know from week 1 to say week 4, it took you 37 minutes to do your walk on day 1. Day 28, you've carved 5-6 minutes off that. So that's really good in terms of when you get back out of lockdown to be able to think, hey, I can actually start to maybe look at events you want to do. You might want to do a fun run, a half marathon, things like that. So it is all very achievable. The planning phase, as I spoke about before, is just really good to keep you on track and to safeguard, to make sure you stick to your sessions. So instead of sticking to the couch, so that's why, again, I spoke before about that training plan. Spend some time on it, because under the embracing change, all of a sudden now you've gone from being incredibly time poor, like most people are with exercise, to suddenly you're exceptionally time rich, apart from those of us that are stuck with little kids at home. But with those of us that do have suddenly you've got a lot more time. So why don't you spend that time to really make a good plan, get those goals in place, try and just think beyond what lockdown will be and start to get a bigger plan in place, because that's going to help motivate you to keep training and keep active. Okay, so it's really really key to be able to do that. Lastly, prehab exercises and work-ons. So if you know you've always got a bad back or you've got a weak core, really start to hammer into those areas while you're at home, stuck in lockdown and things like that, because at least you've got time now to start to go, okay, right, I can start to work on some glute exercises. And that way, we're at least going to be putting ourselves in a better position post-lockdown, so we don't go backwards, because that's what this whole talk's been about, modifying your exercise, for positive change and adapting your lifestyle to make sure that we don't end up going backwards, because we want to keep moving forwards, and there's so many different ways we can. So if you modify your exercise correctly, consult health professionals, and really get a good plan in place, there's nothing stopping you. Thanks so much, everyone, for the talk today. I'm going to be taking questions on this, so you'll be watching this obviously not live, but I'm keen to get your feedback and your questions. I'd love to answer some of those curly ones you've got around what you can do to be better prepared. So yeah, please reach out. I'll be happy to help you. So yeah, thanks so much for today, and yeah, looking forward to hearing from you all soon. Cheers.